Pickaxe.
Hey everyone, Dan Maher here with a fresh episode of the Conversions podcast. This time we're celebrating the polymaths of indie development, aka the solo dev. I had the absolute pleasure of being joined by Alastair Janse van Rensburg, better known as It's Happening, the creator of hit co-op game PlateUp, and Alice J, or as her friends and fans like to call her, SlugGlove, or Slug for short. Alice is working on Rhell, a game of incredible potential, whose premise I will leave to its creator to explain during the course of our conversation. With both PlateUp and Rhell being published by Yogscast Games, I thought it'd be interesting to bring two label mates together at different stages of their game development journey to share their experiences and, as it turned out, quite different approaches to managing all aspects of a game's creation. This episode was recorded during a sweltering afternoon in mid-July, with our participants heroically switching off their fans for an hour for the sake of clean audio, so thank you for that sacrifice. In this episode, we cover the unique benefits and challenges of being a lone wolf, staying motivated when there's still no end in sight, whether a commercial mindset is still important when coming up with a game, how to overcome your shortcomings when you're in charge of everything, and how important communities are as a source of feedback and inspiration. You join our conversation as I ask Alice and Alastair about the origins of their respective dev monikers. More from me after the chat, but for now, enjoy the show. So first of all, I just wanted to get us going. I just said, well, what's in a name? You already talked, Alice, about being known as Slug or SlugGlove. Like, what's the genesis of that?
The genesis was I was in university and I really needed a studio name, and I was like, what's a really good studio name? I know, I'll go Sluggish. And then I realized after 5 seconds, terrible idea calling like a game development studio Sluggish. So then I was just like, oh, I like slugs. I don't know, like a glove. I was looking in my room, like different clothing articles, just like, okay, slug coat, no. Slug hat, no. Slug glove, good enough. And then it has stuck with me for like 5 years now. And I don't know, I like SlugGlove. I think it's funny, but I'm forever just known as Slug.
SlugGlove is very evocative, and I'm not necessarily sure it's in the right way.
I think everyone has a different interpretation of what a SlugGlove is, and I don't think there is a real one, but it's just everyone hears it and has a thought in their head of just like, what could that possibly be?
And Alistair, what about It's Happening?
It's Happening was actually, it's there because it was my Steam name. When Steam said, what's your name? You know, when you're uploading the game, you have to put a name in. And I thought, I think it's my Steam name there. And it's that because years beforehand, some game had a big update I was very excited about. So I renamed myself to It's Happening, and then that stuck. But I think it works quite well as the name, because now it's whenever anyone says It's Happening in conversation, we're all like, that's us, even though it's, obviously not related to us. And the other thing is that it makes the conversations with lawyers and accountants much more interesting when they keep constantly saying, it kind of fit It's Happening into a sentence, and it doesn't kind of make sense and ruins it, which is always fun.
Well, from a company that used to be called Explosive Alan, we share that. It's like trying to get that into a sensible accountancy meeting without everyone sounding utterly ridiculous. It's brilliant. And were both of you at Develop?
No.
Oh, at Brighton, no.
No, but do you go to like indie gatherings, game jams? Are you still involved in that sort of thing?
I should. I don't.
No, I'm not really. So I've been to Gamescom once, and that was it was after the launch of the game though. So we were there, and one of the I remember being at the hotel at the breakfast, and everyone else was like going over pitches and frantically rehearsing things, and we were like, we're just here to have fun, which was really nice in a way. But at the same time, it felt like maybe we should have something to pitch. Yeah, exactly. It was just a lovely little trip for us. But I guess it was good to go before needing to go. We were thinking if we come again with this pitch, we're trying to we wouldn't want to be our first one. But I think it was a nice opportunity to see, but not super useful when we haven't got anything to pitch to people or anything to look at.
Part of the reason that we got you two together is obviously that, Alastair, you have a game that's been published, you have a game that's been incredibly successful. So first up, congratulations. What's the sales now? Last time I checked, it was like 1.5 million. You must have gone.
We've crossed about 2 million on Steam now, so doing really well there. And the other platforms are hard to keep track of, so I don't worry about it. I just look at the Steam number, and and
then just know that it's more than that. That's quite reassuring, right?
I can round up to whatever number I feel like. You can say, well, it's probably more than that. I think the Game Pass numbers as well, if you ever want to feel really good, you can just add those numbers in, because obviously loads of people on Game Pass play it for 2 minutes, then some don't like it, but the numbers really get added up there.
So Alice, you're at that point now where your next game, Rhell, is on the cusp of being announced formally, and that you might soon be sort of entering the same cycle as Alastair, I guess, in terms of having to do some self-promotion, getting to the marketing side of things. Like, are you used to any of that? Like, what are you anticipating?
I'm anticipating, hopefully, I don't have to do anything. I don't know anything about marketing. I'm kind of just hoping Yogscast more so handles it than I do, because I'm just dreadful at social media. I don't get it at all. But my plan, my marketing strategy, I'm just going to post a bunch of funny things from the game, and hopefully that's good enough. That's my genius marketing strategy there. Just just be funny. But I honestly don't know. My brain just turns off whenever it comes to marketing. It's not a very good advice thing, but that's just where I'm at with marketing. It's kind of just like, do whatever I think is funny.
Yeah, that's definitely relatable for me. I think I had the same kind of experience when signing with a publisher. I think people often say, like, is that a bad idea? They take a cut and things. But my attitude was always like, hold on, I want to make games. I don't want to do marketing and uploading things to portals and stuff like that, and to let them handle that, because they know what they're doing. So my marketing efforts for PlateUp was, I submitted it to one thing to show it off, and I sent it to one YouTuber, and I was like, marketing finished, I'm done, and that was it. And the YouTuber was Stump Games, who were massive in the 4-player cult place, and they didn't reply for months and months. And then on New Year's Day, they picked up, they played it, and they played it every single day basically for like a year. They were completely obsessed with it. So that worked really well. And the thing I submitted it to was Tiny Teams, Yogscast's event, and they obviously published it after that. So I did two things, and they both went ridiculously well. So either I'm really good at it, or I just got very, very lucky. But I think I can definitely relate to the marketing, not my part. Someone else can handle that.
That's amazing. So yeah, you may have set yourself some unrealistic expectations for like future titles.
Yeah.
No, just get lucky every single time and it'll be fine.
Yeah. That's really smart.
Well, I mean, Alice, your way of promoting sort of, I guess, proto-Rhell in a way has been across YouTube already. You have your own sort of YouTube persona, and you've kind of been showing off the systemic nature of the game through that already. Like, what was your thinking in terms of putting it out there so publicly at like an early stage, and has that helped you all in terms of that journey, in terms of getting that like immediate feedback from people? Oh
yeah, definitely. I think even if it's like a weird YouTube comment, it's still good to get the kind of feedback, because if it's someone just like in a comment, just like I put out a 10-minute video of a new mechanic, and they're like, I don't like this actually, here's my manifesto on why I don't like this. Even if it's like a super early thing that I'm gonna be changing anyway, it's like kind of good to get that in just intense guttural feedback from a person. I mean, maybe if you have the stomach to handle that. I think maybe I'm broken in a specific way where I'm okay with someone on the internet just like telling me a mechanic is bad, because I will just ignore all the negativity and be like, what could I gain from this? What could I learn? Kind of bit. But I think personally it's kind of helpful for me, because I can just look at like what's the most intense, visceral, immediate reaction someone is getting from whatever I'm making, and then I can kind of funnel that into an improvement.
How about you, Alice? I mean, you from that start of getting it in front of such a major channel, getting it out there like that, and you're constantly like refining the game, and you're still making fixes however long after its release. Do you feel like the community now feels a little more, I guess, invested in its development, and in some ways more entitled about the way that it progresses?
I think that, there's a lot to talk about there. I think just on top of what Alice was saying there, I think I completely agree that immediate feedback is so useful, especially in the early stages of the game. I think the best time, like in terms of like productivity and enjoyment of the game, is before we launched. We did a bunch of public playtests where anyone could just sign up on Steam and you could play for a weekend. And people were so involved there, and the amount of feedback that you could get. And also because it was just Steam, and it was just like early, kind of not in early access, no one was paying for it. It was completely free. It meant that anything people said, I could just react to directly. And so one of my my favorite parts was when people would like report a bug on Discord, and I'd reply like 30 minutes later saying, it's patched, it's fixed now, you can just go play it. It was like that immediate loop. And then contrasting that to now, where it's like, we have all these console things out, and the updates are really quite slow. And it's because like someone will report a bug on Reddit, say, and I'll go, okay, sure, I fixed that. And we put into the code, it'll be on some branch, and then in like maybe 5 months, it'll have made its way through all the pipelines, through all the checks into a build that it can then be launched with. And it's like, so people will say like, oh, I just fixed this thing. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll do that. It'll be ready, at some point there. So I think that idea of going from that early stage where you're getting this really quick feedback, it's so, you feel so close to the community. I have to say I'm not maybe broken in the same way, to use your term there. The negative comments I find very very difficult. So I never read the Steam reviews. I always go, I have a link to the positive Steam reviews, and I get someone else to read the negative ones and relay the nice parts there. And I'm always conscious of the fact that, because so many people, our refund percentage is like 5%, but that means the number of refunds we've had is like, in the tens of thousands. So somewhere, and I deliberately don't know where, on the Steam backend UI, there's a link to tens of thousands of people writing a message saying why they don't want my game and they want their money back. And I'm very carefully avoiding finding that link, so no one tell me where that is. But I think that it's really interesting to draw this contrast, like you say, with this evolving community between the beginning stages where people were like, it was free for them. They were just signing up to the playtest, but they were really involved, really interested, and then kind of doing things and giving them updates as soon as they suggested them and making changes and seeing how people react to that, through to now where we're like, a few years after, almost 3 years after launch. And the number of things that if I wanted to change it, it becomes much, much harder. And I think it's important to see kind of both sides of this, because on one end, it's like the ability to be more dynamic with your game and update it in response to feedback is really good. And I'm saying, like, actually, the stuff is changing, and people want this, so I've done that. But the other side of that is that people who've been playing the game for a long time are like really invested in the way that it works right now. So there are mechanics in the game, like the franchising mechanic is one that comes to mind immediately, which are we in a very good place. But there are systems that some people are really into, and they bought this game and they've played it for years with this mechanic. And if it was pre-launch, I'd probably tear the whole thing out and do it from scratch and say, look, patch note, little bullet point somewhere saying redone franchises from scratch. But if I did that now, I think a lot of people would be like, hang on, I've been playing this game for years and I've loved it. Why have you suddenly taken this away from me? So there's a question like, do you add another extra feature on top? And one of the issues of supporting the game in the long term is how much people's feedback you actually kind of put in. Because if you put too much stuff in, you end up with a kind of bloated experience where it's kind of doing a bit for everybody. And actually, the game ends up being kind of weaker for it. Even if every incremental change was good, by the end you got like 10,000 extra features, all of which need to then be supported and need to work with everything else. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the experience is so different from the beginning through to now after a kind of a lot of support time.
I guess there's a question then of like, when's the end? When do you finally feel like you can draw a line under, a release game? It used to be a very, very different story, but now in this time of like endless expansions, patches, all these ways that we can effectively be George Lucas, adding to A New Hope over and over until it's almost unrecognizable. Like Alice, like Rhell is built on so many sort of interconnected systems. I mean, first of all, if Alastair might know about it already, but like if you can sort of tell us about what the concept of Rhell is, where that came from, and what drove you as a solo dev to make something that has so many complex things going on at once that it must be sort of a QA nightmare.
Oh, it is. There is so much stuff. There's things I have made like a week ago that I'm like, I did it for a puzzle and I'm like, I don't even know I could do that. That's insane. But yeah, to explain it really briefly, the game's about like you're a little wizard and you've got 40 kind of key spells, which are, like kind of a keyword sort of thing. And you can combine any 5 of them in any 5 combinations, up to 5. And then it will create a new unique spell based on that. And when I was, first coming up with the idea, I was like, oh, this will be fun. It'll have like some elemental stuff like fire and ice makes water. And then I calculated how many combinations there would be, and it was like 11 billion. And then I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just write all 11 billion. That'll be fine. But I think for me, I just thought it would be funny. I just thought it'd be funny to code, because I think I get in my head just an idea which I think will be fun to do, and then I'll just keep doing it. And I spent about a year making just all the mechanics for it, which I think it turned out okay. I don't think it's too broken. I think it works okay. But I think for me, it's just kind of like an idea I have. I think it's fun. I don't really consider like how overly complicated it's going to end up being at like the final points. I just kind of think in the next step of just like, oh, wouldn't a fire rune be fun? Wouldn't that be cool? And I don't think of how that's going to affect everything else. It's kind of just like I'm driven by what I think is going to be fun to make next. And then what's, going to be fun for the player, I guess the player can have fun too. But it's mostly about me. But I think that's kind of what's driven me. I think a lot of my projects and just like things I do for fun and things I make are just kind of driven by what I think is going to be enjoyable to do for me personally. And then, I'll iterate on it to make it good for a player experience. But at its core, it's for me. It's not for you. Rhell's not for you. It's for me.
You just get to share the experience. That's your privilege.
Yeah.
So, Alastair, again, tell us about this sort of the origins of PlateUp. As I understand it, it was during lockdown that you were looking for some kind of multiplayer funsies.
Yeah, it was multiplayer funsies at New Year's. It was the New Year's in lockdown where you couldn't, everyone was stuck wherever they happened to be, and it was me and two housemates who were there, and we're having a great time playing co-op games. But we felt that there was something that kind of wasn't there in kind of linking a lot of them together. So I think in particular we found one of the big problems with the co-op games is everyone needs to kind of agree on it. Because if you've got three of you, you don't want two people to be having fun and one person like, fine, I'll play it because I have to. And equally, when you find a fun co-op game, it's really annoying when it's like short, because then you like, finally found a game we all agree on. Okay, we finished that, right? What's next? And you're back to square one, and you end up spending. It's a sort of Netflix problem. You're scrolling through to find something to watch, and most of the time, then you find something to watch, then you're back to scrolling again. And what you really want is that experience in the co-op game where it's like, actually, we can play this now, and it's kind of something we can keep going back to. And so that's kind of informed the design there. We were playing lots of games we found really fun, but then you kind of get used to the mechanic and it'd be finished. And you're like, okay, well, now we've got to find another game. And that idea that of the sort of like making it as accessible as possible to each player, both in terms of how much they're going to enjoy it, but also in terms of whether they can kind of drop in and drop out. That like very story-driven games from co-op, for instance, if we're playing that, it's like, okay, well, we were having great time, and then you had to go away for 2 hours and come back. But now, like, you don't know the plot anymore, we have to go explain it, or do we go back and play, or do we whatever? And so having this kind of short run-like mechanic in a kind of roguelike style means that, like, actually then when we hit the go bar, we're all on a level footing. Maybe we've learned some new tricks we can tell you, but broadly we're all playing the same thing. We don't have to kind of feel bad for playing it when you weren't online or something, or in person. And the real kind of the formative experience of the game is when we were playing it at this New Year, and we played Unrailed. And we were playing that. It was like we played it for like 5 hours straight from like midnight until like 5 a.m. Like, this is so much fun. And the next day is lockdown, so next day it's what do we do? We're back to playing Unrailed again. Then just really, really into it, and really enjoying that experience of once you've found something that it kind of clicked for everybody, having that ability to kind of go back to it and have it as a sort of thing that's in a way that kind of exists, that you can kind of all kind of build together almost. In Unrailed, you're building a train that you drive forward, and it becomes a kind of thing that you're doing as a group. There's a lot of other co-op games that can be kind of fun in the moment. They don't have that feeling of like, actually, this is a thing that we've kind of worked on together. And so having that experience meant that we've kind of everyone had their own little role, their own little part to play in this thing, and we all kind of building a thing together. And yeah, so after that, I had been building a game before that, and actually just kind of threw it all away. And, you know what, this is the one. I'm going to make a co-op game instead.
So at that point, was indie development already a full-time job? Or was that for either of you? Was it ever the intention for being a game developer to be your full-time job, or is it something that you kind of phased into once you sort of found the skills and realized that was actually where your passions lay?
I was part-time at that point. So I was in academia before, and I started off doing it in kind of spare, in the weekends and things. And then I slowly got more and more part-time. And I think when I started PlateUp and PlateUp started going well in development sense, that's when I started to move to kind of significantly part-time. Before that, it was more like, a bit of extra time. I can't remember exactly, but no, by the end, I was 90% part-time, which feels like it's really part-time at that point. And I had 9 weeks of making PlateUp.
That's just an hour.
Yeah, 9 weeks. It was by week, so it was 9 weeks of PlateUp, and then I'd go back and do 1 week of my old job. It was like, this is my foot is in this door. But other than that, because I think it's probably a very common feeling for every indie game developer making their first game of like, this could definitely go absolutely nowhere. And so having that foot in the door, I'd be like, you know what? Actually, I never left, did I? So I'm just putting my hours back up again. Which didn't come to once PlateUp came out. I dropped entirely. But yeah.
For me, I was doing like freelance before this, and then as I was doing more and more freelance, I I'll save it for the nightmare section of the podcast where we talk about our nightmares. But I was doing freelance stuff, and then it was just kind of like serendipitous where I left one job and then, like ran out of freelance stuff there. And I was doing art stuff. But then in my free time, I was doing Rhell. And after I left the job, I had a pretty good pitch sort of segment for Rhell. So I thought, I'll apply for some other stuff. And I might as well just send Rhell to people at this point. And, I got a reply back from Rhell faster than I got a reply back for the jobs I was applying for. So it kind of just worked out where I was like, oh, I guess I'll do this now. I guess this will be different, and I'll just do this now. So for me, it was kind of just doing things on the side until it all of a sudden just became my real job.
So was that your journey to getting Yogscast on board as a publisher?
Oh, yeah. I basically sent it to them, and then the next day they replied to me. It was very fast. I was surprised. It was even the next day. It was in like a week of me sending it to them where they replied and was like, hey, we have a call about this. So they were very on board about it, which was really, really exciting for me.
Alice, it sounds like your experience was pretty similar.
Well, mine was sort of backwards from that because I visited Tiny Teams, which obviously was just processed as in a batch with all the other Tiny Teams people. And then after Tiny Teams, I sent them an email being like, thank you so much, because this is the point where no one had responded to my game. This is before the YouTubers had played it or anything. So it was just like me with my like one wish list a week or whatever, like, please someone respond to my game. And then the first time anyone ever played it that wasn't me, in fact, this is way before we playtested, was on the stream in Tiny Teams. So it was suddenly from like no one has ever seen this to 1,000 people are now watching this get played, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a disaster. But then after that, I sent them an email saying like, thank you so much. Because Tiny Teams I think is a really good opportunity for small teams. It's like really good coverage and really like very focused on what developers really want from a festival. And so I sent an email saying, thank you so much. This is so great. I'm really grateful for putting my game into the thing. And it's so kind. And then they replied saying, yeah, no worries. Do you interested in publish? And I was like, oh yeah, all right, then let's do that. It's my falling into the correct version of marketing approach to things, of like not really even thinking about like, oh yeah, all right, then cool. So I actually didn't email to ask. I didn't have to. They were even more proactive than that. They were before I even asked.
Love it. The sort of sure why not approach to self-promotion. Yeah, right. Sounds good. How much would you say of your respective, solo development disciplines? Because, when you say solo development, people have to realize that's coding, that's graphics, that's UI, that's UX, that's music, that's all these elements. Like, how many elements or how many skills, should I say, were you sort of bringing to the table already, and how much of it were you kind of learning by necessity, like as it went along?
For me, I was already doing sort of freelance animation, which I had a degree in. It's my only actual real skill set if you talk academics. But I was doing freelance animation, and then I was doing a lot of freelance animation for little studios. So through doing that, they were just kind of like, could you also maybe 3D model stuff for us too? There's only 3 of us. And, through doing like small studio work for so long, I kind of just fell into also doing 3D art stuff. And then 3D, those are the only 2 things, 3D art stuff and animation. I thought there was a third 3D thing. It's just those 2. Art and animation as I go on. And then in my free time, I was kind of already prototyping just like little code things just for fun, really. So when I started Rhell, I kind of already had a pretty good idea of how to code, how to model stuff, how to animate stuff. And the only thing I kind of picked up in between Rhell is I started making music, just because I was sitting around one day and I thought it would be fun to make music. And then I made the whole OST for Rhell in like a very short time because I just got really, really into it. So I kind of had most of the skill set already, and then I just developed the music skill set because I thought it would be, just because I found it entertaining, really. I think I'm the type of person where I just pick something up very fast if I find it fun. So I think that helps me a lot in solo development, because I do just find every aspect very, very fun. So through, just making the game on myself, I come to a new thing that I need to do, and I'm just like, well, I'll just learn that because it will be fun. And then end up doing it, adding it to a skill set. And I think that's kind of like the beauty of solo development, that you get to do all these fun, different aspects.
And prior to Rhell, you also released, was it Pell?
Oh, I did. A little momentum platformer.
Yeah. How long was that in development for? Like, what were your expectations around that?
That was kind of something I was doing just, in the background. I was very into momentum platformers at that time. So it's kind of just like, oh, I really want to make one. That'd be fun. So I ended up just just making one for fun. I think my expectations was, I think just like some people will play this and it'll be fun kind of thing with it. And that was in between sort of doing other, freelance stuffs. And that was like, I think around a year of development-ish. And I think that was like a fun kind of progression from PetPel to Rhell, because PetPel technically is like very simpler, but I was kind of doing the Rhell thing of, I'm just going to cram as many mechanics into this as physically possible sort of thing, because I think it's fun to do. So the through line between PetPel and Rhell is I don't have restraints and I like to make mechanics, but I think there's a nice progression to it, doing like a kind of simplistic 2D momentum platformer into a more complicated 3D puzzle sort of thing.
That's really interesting to hear, because I've watched a YouTube video of yours where you're playing Rhell and you're getting through a gate in like 50 different ways.
Oh, I love that video. That was one of the main things I sent to Yogscast, of just like this ridiculous video, a bunch of different mechanics. But I think that's a very fun video to show off how just weird Rhell is.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable. I mean, just it's that you're kind of puzzling through, trying to get through a gate, and you watch the video and you're like, okay, obviously you put statue on the thing and it works fine. And then you keep watching and it's like 10 minutes of you doing these incredibly, like, by the end you're like turning the statue into a bouncing trampoline, then bouncing over it, and then wind blows you over the wall, and it's like, okay, that's, and then you're turning into a balloon or something. It's completely crazy. And when I was watching it, I thought, wow, that must have, so my background is very much from the coding side and none of the art. And I was thinking like, wow, the person who made that must really know how to do loads of programming. That's like programming background. All these like interactions, like you say, you're 11 billion. I think, oh God, making that must be so I'm really impressed to hear that it's from an art background. That's I've been just out of like coding interactions there. That sounds like a really interesting challenge.
I think for me, I kind of have like the opposite perspective looking at, because from an art background, I'm looking at something like that if someone made it and I'm like, oh, that's so much animation to do. There's so much drawings. Who cares about the coding? You got to draw all those bits. But yeah, I think the coding is just something I picked up in university when I was sort of doing animation on the side, and I was like, I just like numbers. I just like writing stuff that's very logical. It's just like a fun thing for me. So I'm kind of glad that Rhell's developed out into this thing that is kind of very heavily coding based, because I just gotta have fun coding.
I mean, I'm the exact opposite for a coding background, and I kind of learned 3D modeling to make PlateUp. And if you Google Blender how to make a character model tutorial, I'll say one of the models looks suspiciously like the PlateUp model, and that's not a coincidence. So that was a skill set that I kind of picked up entirely. But one of the weird quirks about PlateUp is that none of the models are textured, and that's because I didn't want to have to learn how to do UV unwrapping, so I just never bothered. So every model is just entirely exactly right. No one likes that. And then whenever I now work with an artist that's like, can you make some models? They're always like, I can't texture it. What am I supposed to do? I'm like, you're free. You don't have to UV wrap. Man, they're like, no, I really want to be able to texture this. This is making my life way easier. So maybe there's a reason people do all this texturing and stuff. But for me, it was like, no, I'm going to avoid that. And I think actually, from a solo dev perspective, I think it is kind of important to just kind of make your kind of asset pipeline or your coding pipeline, whatever it is, design it around exactly what you can do really well. So it was like, I want to be able to make models really, really quickly without having to like overheads of like lots of different things. And so one of the, like, coming back to what I was saying before about like iteration speeds over this early development, responding to feedback, one thing I didn't want to get caught out in is like, if the PlateUp has like the cards, which are like a challenge, say, and one thing we could do for that is like have like 2D art and stuff like that. Like, there's a nice picture of like the dish and stuff. But my concern there was not just like, okay, there's a lot of work to do, but it's like, if someone comes and says like, actually, I don't think the breakfast dish should have, beans in it anymore, we should get rid of those. I want to be able to say, yeah, sure, delete. And rather than going, okay, now I have to go back to the artist and say, I need more 2D art for this, and now I need to go to like the particle effects I made for that and redo those. So part of the reason the art is so simple is because it means that the game can be really gameplay driven, which I think is really important to me. So coming from that background of code and maybe kind of justifying it myself of saying, like, actually, what I really want is for the whole thing to just flow very naturally from kind of my skill set, and therefore kind of avoid these issues of like getting bogged down in these really kind of complicated pipelines that make everything else really rigid.
I feel like with solo development, it's kind of like you kind of like have a focus and you know what your weaknesses are because there's only one of you. So you can kind of make a game around that and just like avoid the weaknesses, which I think is like a very fun aspect of solo development, where it's just like, you know what you're good at and you can make a game around those strengths.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting to see in the design phase there, I'm saying like, actually, I'm just not going to add like this thing because it needs loads of particle effects. So I don't know how to do those. Or in my case, I've had those kind of neat because you can kind of code those. So I was like, yeah, particle effects, I can do those. Whereas if it was like textures, no, I can't do any of those. And so lots of things like Like, for instance, when they order food, the thing that appears above their head is just a 3D model, because I don't know how to do the 2D art. I can't do any 2D art at all. And like the little card that pops up isn't the texture, the background, it's actually a shader that I wrote that draws the back of the card, because I thought it's easier to write the code that draws a card than it is to just open Photoshop and make a card.
That's so... I would have been the opposite. I would have been like, I'm not going to touch a shader until I die. I'm just going to draw it.
No, shader's all the way down. So there's an outline shader that does everything as well, so that you don't have to worry about any kind of like, everything is fine. You make the model, and then you basically have to just say, this is like blue. And it goes, okay, cool, everything else is fine from there. And yeah, but it's interesting to see that kind of contrast and how it really informs like what you can do. And I think also going forward, that like maintaining things that really fit in your skill set, which I think is true both of the art that we're talking about, but also the code as well. Like the whole PlateUp code base is written obviously like by me broadly, and therefore when after launch and there was 2 of us working on the game, actually one of the problems that we had was like, for me, it was like the people would report a bug that was like, oh, there was one kind of funny one where the little robot vacuum could catch fire and it would drive around catching everything else on fire, but you couldn't put it out. So it would just be this little terrifying fire machine setting everything on fire, and then we had to fix that bug. And for me, it's like, oh, it's appliance set things on fire system, go to that and then just change that. But then, and then when Darryl was working on stuff, it was like, he's like, I have no idea, how am I supposed to know that? Like, obviously you can go through the code base and you can expect, he's not saying you can't do that, but like the difference between someone who'd worked on the code base so much, and because it was all kind of attuned to how I would think about it, if I ever needed to fix something, I just go, well, how would I have implemented that? Okay, it's probably like that, and there it is. Whereas if you're in a team, you get this such overhead of like, you have to both, when you're doing things, you have to conform to it, like it's the standard of the team, because you can't do everyone doing their own thing. But also, whenever you try and like reflect on what's happening and how things work, you have to think about how would the team do that rather than just myself. So the benefit of solo development there is that in kind of throughout the entire thing, like we're talking about with the design, but also with the kind of maintenance and the code and things like that, you can really focus on exactly what, like the way you would do it and do it like that. And I think one thing that we say now between the 2 of us is like, it's better to kind of just pick one bad idea and go with that than try and both be doing 2 good ideas, because then you get nothing that works. Whereas if you just do one bad idea, at least it's there and you have a thing. And so now it's like, actually, it's solo development, you summarize the entire thing like that. It's just one person doing everything badly, but it's fine. As long as it's consistent, that's fine. Like with art, they often said like, consistency is the most important thing. Just make all your art, and even if it's bad, it'll be okay, rather than having like bits of mishmash and stuff.
How do you both stay motivated? People know who've been in any kind of solo dev thing for any length of time that making a game always takes longer than you anticipate. It's always going to be a longer process, and there must be a point that you reach where you're like, I'm so deep into this and I can't see light at the end of the tunnel. What is it that kind of helps you to continue pushing through? And I guess that ties in with sort of a mental health side of it as well. Like, how do you kind of just stay in that right frame of mind and maintain that sense? Because obviously also being sort of self-employed, there's no sort of clocking in, clocking out time. You don't feel, you're not beholden to sort of holidays. You can work from 5 a.m. till, midnight if you so wish. And sometimes that can be the way it works out. So how do you sort of maintain a degree of control over that and both remain sort of, convinced that the path you're on is the right one?
I think for me, I'm the opposite, where like, I don't need to have motivation. I have as much motivation as possible. I just love Rhell so much. Sometimes I'll like dream, and I'll dream of Rhell code I want to make, and then I'll wake up and I'll make it. And that's paradise for me. I love it. I think my opposite thing is I actually have to restrain myself and not work on Rhell every second of every day, because between you and I, that's not very healthy to do. It's not very healthy to wake up and work and then just work and then you go to sleep and then you just do that forever. Well, I mean, it might be. Let's just do that. Never mind. Let's just do that. So I think for me, it's more the opposite of just like, okay, I've got to make days off for myself. I've got to do other stuff. So I'm not just like a husk of a human being who just codes and draws. So I think for me, it's kind of getting that restraint of making the thing you really enjoy doing, but also setting boundaries for yourself so you're not consumed by it. And if you do want to still be consumed by it, you can think of that as just like, well, the time away gives you good ideas for it. So it's technically still working when you're not working. If you want to still work, if you want to trick yourself into still working while not working. So I think for me, it's more just that. It's more just like, I gotta take a step away from this. I gotta go for a walk. I gotta do something else. I gotta go to a cafe and not look at a blue wizard for 10 hours. But in terms of motivation, I don't know. I think I'm just an obsessive person who loves doing what I'm doing. So I just like it. I just have fun. That's my motivation. I'm just having fun here. I'm just playing my toys.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say completely, yeah, exactly the same, I think. Like you were saying earlier, like you're making Rhell for yourself and not for other people, I think is really important. People say like, make the game you want to play. Part of that is because you get consistent vision, whatever, but part of that is also because you're going to be doing it for like however many hours over however many months. Like you can't be like sitting there thinking, this is awful, but I bet someone will enjoy it eventually. There's just no point. But I mean, I had the added advantage that I was doing this in lockdown when I was making the start of PlateUp, so there was nothing else to do. I was very much in that camp of you know, I'd get up, work on PlateUp as much as I possibly could, taking a break occasionally to eat, and then go back to, you know, fine, I'll go back to sleep, I have to, and then wake up again and carry on working. And, you know, there were points where I was kind of too excited about working on the game to sleep. I was like, no, I've just got to carry on, because you got to get really into it, right? If you're going to, like you say, without any external motivation, if you're not the one motivating the whole way through, it's, you know, it's really important. But I guess I can contrast that now with like post-launch. Once kind of building that thing that you're building is really important, and like that's really good. But then post-launch, there's often a lot more things which are just much less exciting in lots of ways. So for instance, you know, sometimes it's just a really annoying bug, or some kind of feature doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and you have to fix that. And that happens a bit pre-launch as well, and it you know, it does get a bit tiring. But there are definitely times now where it's like you do have to then kind of rely on kind of a disciplined version rather than straight motivation, because I don't know how, you know, I don't know if anybody's like super motivated to work on why the leaderboard isn't working in this random case, and it doesn't seem to work sometimes, and you don't know why, and that's been a week of that, and it's not quite working, and at that point you kind of just have to say like, you know, I'll get this done. I can go back to working on nice fun thing. I can add new dishes, or I can start playing with a new feature or something. But yeah, having that kind of baseline of like just being really keen on your project, I think is really important.
Do you find, you know, going back to the point you're making where, you know, your sort of art style of the game, Alastair, is born out of necessity and things like that. Who were your kind of primary sources of like learning, advice, sense checking? You know, were there individuals, or were you just kind of like leaning on communities? You know, how did you sort of muddle through those bits that you perhaps weren't so experienced in the first place?
So when I was first making it, I was still living with housemates, obviously, in the kind of lockdown thing. So there was a lot of like a quick iteration there, but we'd play the game and see what we thought, and then particularly to do with like the early like visual design and the early gameplay design there, which was really helpful. You know, it's like a very immediate, and because it was so tightly coupled to the motivation for making the game, you know, it was about making a game that the three of us could go and enjoy, and therefore, if three of us were going to go play it, we should be enjoying it, right? So that was a kind of direct mapping there. And then over time, I think the most valuable thing that we did throughout the entire experience was definitely the playtests, because having that experience there, both in terms of like getting the feedback and seeing what people thought and having that kind of validation, but also like in terms of like kind of like QA is a big part where like launching on consoles now is really scary, because if I launch on PC, we've got a player at playtest, they'll have been playing it for weeks. It won't crash on launch because they'll have found that. I go on console, it's like, well, like 6 people have run this. There's me and 4 QA people have run this, so it probably doesn't crash. You know, it probably doesn't delete your saves. It probably doesn't break your console. I'm sure it'll be okay. And it's really hard to kind of feel that security that you can feel from the playtests. But the other thing about the playtests again is the feeling of motivation. Like, you know, it really helps to kind of sustain that feeling of like, I really love my game. To have these people going like, yeah, this is so much fun. Like my favorite part of all of game development is posting patch notes for things. It's such a clean feeling of like, you sure you made the feature and people are going to enjoy that stuff. But when people are actually playing it, they don't really like, they don't talk. They're busy playing, and maybe they'll review it afterwards, whatever. But if you like, we go to Discord, we post patch notes, like immediately people are going to be responding, and they're going to be talking like directly about the you know, their feeling of how excited they are about this thing, and that often you get this feeling of like post something that like they really like. You can immediately tell they're like, oh, this is so much fun. This is going to be so. I can't wait for this feature. I can't believe that's so cool. I hadn't thought about that. But it sounds so cool. And that works generally very positively. Also, there's downside parts of that as well, where people pick up on things that you weren't that in, like you are, whatever. I'll add that into the patch, and people are like, this is the main, like pre-launch. We made this big patch. It was like it was July, just before, so a few months before, or a month before launch. And it was like, this is a really cool patch. Got loads of cool features, and it's all stuff I've been working on for ages. And we gave it to our community manager, and she was like, people aren't going to like this patch. And I was like, why? What do you mean? It's so cool. It's got all these cool features. Like, yeah, but there's no new dish in this patch, is there? So like, people really want a new dish. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll have a new dish. So we added burgers, which are like really simple. It's like one burger model and like cheese or whatever, and you can put it together and like, fine, here you go. Here's the burgers. And then releases it, and it's like, oh my god, it's the burgers update. Oh my god, they've added burgers. This is so cool. I'm like, no guys, come on, all this other stuff that I've added for you. So it's cool. I mean, it's obviously, it's great to see people so keen, but it's like people, you know, liking things that you're like, that wasn't that important. Look at how I reworked the controller interface. Come on.
You need the burger. You need the burger as the hook. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get rid of the burger and
the thing for the everyman. Yeah. and how about you, Alice? How's it been? Obviously, you are incredibly sort of self-motivated and utterly capable. It seems so. But you know, who are the people that you're kind of you're leaning on or reaching out to for advice on stuff?
I think in early developments, my like most of that was just like me going to my partner and being like, just like, hey, check this out, and showing her the most insane thing I've coded of just like, okay, so if you make a portal that's an area, makes a bubble, and then you make another one that's tiny and it shoots Rhell out and she gets really big, and then I'll just show her that and she'll be like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And that's my motivation. My motivation is torturing my partner and making her really confused at what I've made. I think that sort of stuff, or just like, you know, like my friends, I'll show them early builds before you know, I pitched it to Yorkscast and everything, and it was still a prototype. I think that really helps because I'd have experience of just like, oh, here's this thing. Like for example, I showed one of my friends the puzzle we were talking about earlier, where it's the buttons and it's the door and you press it. I was showing one of my friends that, and then she was like, could you not just make an area that's a portal and then walk through the wall? And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. And I did it, and it just works. And I'm like, oh, that invalidates the whole puzzle. Oops. But I think that kind of thing is really fun for me, just getting this feedback and showing people the systems, and then them being like, oh, what about this thing that I have never thought about? And it just kind of works with the systems I've put in place because it's sort of like a thing that integrates with itself. So I think that's kind of like my main excitement motivator from other people, of just like showing them something and then they come back with something I haven't thought about, and it's in the game system because it works together. And I think that's just very funny. It's fun to be surprised by something I've made.
Well, knowing what I know of the game, it feels like that's going to be an ongoing conversation for quite a long time after launch as well. Like suddenly that game is in the hands of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, you know, millions of people. You must be quite excited, knowing your nature, to see like how people are going to be actively going out there and just really trying to break the game.
Oh my god, speedruns of this are going to be insane. I'm expecting someone to be like, yep, I found a way to rug warp with the scarecrow by crushing myself and doing this and this and this. Even an internal thing, I got the first draft of the trailer back today, and in the trailer, the person recording it did something I've never considered doing before. So I was watching the trailer and I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's interesting. They just solved a puzzle in a way I'd never expected before. So I'm so excited for when the demo comes out, or even when the full game comes out, and just like, what are people going to do? How are people going to break this? It's kind of like an interesting feeling too. Just how are they going to destroy my piece of art? And I think that's fun.
How was it sort of creating a game that, I mean, you know, there's still an overarching narrative. There's a story that you've had to think about as well. Like, what's been the balance of, you know, first and foremost, building a game that's about systems and experimentation, but making sure that that's kind of tied together in a package where they're going to find the character interesting and find the world and the NPCs, you know, charming and kind of worth sticking around for?
I think for me, it's kind of just like making it fun and engaging. So a lot of the NPCs, they'll have like some element where they'll tie their story or their thing back to things you can do. Like a character might, you might explore a bit and you might discover this thing, and you can go back to a character and then ask them about it, and then they'll hint at things you can do with like the experimentation of the world. I think it's kind of tying in the systems with the design of the world together, and then the NPCs can of course interact, kind of like link those two together, where they'll exist in the world and they'll present things to the player in the world, and then they can use those in the systems. So I think it's kind of just having this sense of like fun around the NPCs, of just like what they can and can't do, or like where they'll go, where they'll point the player at, and then that'll kind of direct you to doing like these fun sort of puzzly bits in the game.
Nice. And like Alistair, with it's happening, obviously you're still working on fixes and various bits for PlateUp right now. I mean, what are your sort of aspirations going forward? Are you kind of, do you see yourselves as like the co-op multiplayer, fun studio, or are you looking to kind of go more ambitious as you develop new games? Perhaps things with a more narrative event. Yeah, that's the natural progression, right? Then the battle royale, and then
it's interesting. I think so. Obviously, the kind of natural thing is making games that people who played PlateUp would enjoy, because it kind of seems sort of silly to make a game that we have this audience who are like, really enjoy PlateUp. Here's a game you're gonna hate. It's great. But then whenever I play games, I'm like, I really want to make a game like this. Like I was playing Blueprints recently, and I really want to make a really puzzle. This sounds so fun, and like looking at Rhell as well, like this kind of sandboxy like vibes of like, that sounds so much fun. Like you should do something like that instead. But I worry. I mean, obviously there's lots of overlap, and it's not like people wouldn't enjoy the two games. But like at the same time, it's like actually, we have this kind of framework there, these things going on that would be really good. I do sometimes wonder if I would want to make a game that was not one that I update after launch, after the experience of PlateUp, which has been broadly positive. But I think it's a lot of work to keep going and updating, and we haven't really started a new project yet. So even how nearly 3 years after launch, we're still working on PlateUp, whereas we could have been a good way through another game if we'd gone a different route. I think there's a lot of value in updating games, and I think we would, if we had a game like PlateUp, we would want to keep updating it, and so we wouldn't want to be tying back to what I was saying earlier about a co-op game being one that you could kind of stick with for a long time. Updating it really is important for that, and we see lots of retention. People, when we do updates, people really enjoy them, people come back to them, and so I wouldn't want to not do that for a future co-op game. But compared to a game, say like Blueprints, where I don't think it's that important that it's updated after the fact as much. You obviously want fixes and things and to support it, but it doesn't need every week here's a new piece of content, or every week, every couple of months is new content, like a game like PlateUp was. I don't know, Alice, have you thought about what you're doing after launch?
I have a couple ideas, but it's mostly stuff that I cut from Rhell very early on, where I was like, this is a really good idea, but it's a bit too lofty, so I'm just going to do that later. But it's mostly just like, I think for me, I have a few things in mind for Rhell after launch where it's like, those would be fun ideas I'd like to add right now, but it's like very unconnected to the main game, and it's not necessarily needed. So it's kind of just like adding some extra stuff that I would like to do now, but it's going to add like another year to development time, so I can't do it now. I'll do it later, that sort of thing, which I always quite like in games when it's like an update and it's just like a big chunk of new stuff. But I think also Rhell kind of lends itself very well to having that sort of design because it's very silly and very wacky. I could just like, oh no, the moon has fallen into Rhell and now you can go on the moon sort of thing. Like, a lot of things are very believable in it. I don't really need to work very hard to add a DLC area or like a DLC mechanic or something like that. So for me, it's kind of just like, I think when Rhell comes out, I'll look at what people are saying. I'll look at like kind of what the feedback, what the community behind the game wants, and then maybe work my ideas around that a little bit to kind of give people more of what they're interested in, what they're kind of like looking forward to, or like things that maybe they wanted a bit more fleshing out of sort of thing, while also doing the really fun things that I had to cut from the game years ago.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think on reflection, I would consider that maybe some things that I did try and kind of push in for launch actually would have been better off being done with more time later and with more response to feedback, like the franchise thing I mentioned earlier. Like it's a nice system, but actually maybe if it had come out as a post-launch thing instead, I would have had more time to think about it. And because it's like a long-term thing for players, actually a lot of players don't really need it at launch because they're not going to be able to experience it for a while anyway. So yeah, I think it's good to take that content to actually this is not just, I'm not kind of letting people down by not adding this now. I'm actually going to do a better job of it if I save it for later. To what degree? I mean, you've both kind of answered this to an extent, but I always think there might be some of this at the back of your mind. How commercially are you thinking when you sort of start work on a game? Because obviously there's this perception that you have AAA games, major publishers, they are making game primarily for revenue, and then art second, whereas indies is often perceived to be vice versa. But is there always some kind of voice saying, okay, it's got to have a certain level of appeal, it's got to have some kind of hook that means in this day and age, people on YouTube, people on TikTok are going to be, clipping it and putting it out there? Yeah, I mean, my view on that is that a lot of people that talk about like kind of the sort of people who tell you how to make indie games, how to make successful games and how to make money in these things, they often, I guess by their nature, overly focus on things like that. It's like, how do you get a hook in your game? How do you do this? How do you make sure everyone's going to play it? How do you make sure it's going to go viral and these things? And I think actually the best advice, I think, and a lot of them say this as a quick one-liner at the start, is just make the best game you can. I think one of the advantages of being an indie is you don't actually have to be that successful in order to make your, to do well, because you have effectively, the lowest costs of anyone in the industry compared to any larger studios who have greater costs. You don't have to capture a huge market. You have to just get a solid entry into a niche is completely fine. If you're a AAA game, I don't know what their budget's like, but it's like hundreds of millions or whatever, and you can't be like, okay, it's fine. This tiny community, people who really love this niche, bought our game and they loved it. We made a good 10,000 sales, but they were fantastic sales. You have to be going for this, how to get the most money out of as many people as possible. Whereas as an indie, obviously you want to do well and you want to succeed and you should be kind of somewhat commercially minded, but just doing your thing really well, especially tying back to what we were saying before about make the game that you really enjoy. If you make the game that you really enjoy and you do a good job of it, there's probably enough people like you who will buy it and it will go well. I think, again, that maybe I got quite lucky in a lot of this where PlateUp was a game that streamed very well, I think, for a number of reasons. Like the split screen co-op works very well on the stream, I think, and stuff like that. And so maybe I got quite lucky and sort of accidentally did the things that make it do well. But in terms of how kind of commercially minded we are, the answer, I'd like to say the answer is kind of not at all. And I guess that's kind of cheating in a way, because it's easy to say that now, because obviously it's not that important to be commercially successful now. We're kind of okay with that. I mean, the game got so much support that now we can do just whatever people kind of want us to do. And so, for instance, the questions of stuff like, should we package our updates into DLC and sell those? Has never really been a serious contention. We'd rather just give it out for free. And partly tying back into what I was saying before about the fact you only use kind of small, comparatively small uptake, is that actually, because PlateUp's done very well, but actually as a percentage of Steam users, it's tiny, right? There's lots of people who have never heard of PlateUp, which means that even just doing an update and getting the extra coverage from people playing it again, you get lots of sales anyway, which kind of doesn't make sense in a sort of very kind of, I don't know, if I thought about it in the kind of consumer modeling way, be like, hang on, why is giving the people an update giving us more sales? It doesn't really follow. But actually the market, it seems like the numbers are the market is so big compared to how many people you really need to sell to. I think I'm remembering this off the top of my head, but a long time ago, just after our launch, so we had most of our, the bulk of sales, Steam did a co-op fest, and one of the things that Steam lets you see is how many people view your capsule and how many people click on it in certain contexts. And so what that let us do was see, how many people view it and how many people who own it saw it. And so what that told us was what percentage of people that were clicking on the Steam co-op fest, so i.e. co-op players on Steam, actually own PlateUp. And it's like 5% or to like 2%. There's some tiny number, which means that actually, you're not trying to squeeze out as much money as possible from this tiny. You just need to make your game and get people to hear about it. And if people like it, there's probably enough of a niche to make, a successful result. So we try and avoid the commercial part, basically.
I think No Man's Sky was kind of the poster child for that attitude as well, where they, to this day, keep rolling out these expansions for free. And you can see that's kind of the goal, isn't it? It's like they've got the inbuilt audience don't need to continue to be sold to. It's more about continuing the sort of lifespan of that game by bringing more and more people in every time there's an update posted, because like you say, it gets the media coverage, it gets placement on Steam again, it gets shown in all these places that typically once the game's out you don't really see again. So that in itself sort of helps to just reheat the game periodically and have people go, okay, maybe this is the time I get into it. Or people have been living under a rock and suddenly hear about No Man's Sky for the first time 6 years later or something.
I mean, that's what I had. I played No Man's Sky at release and then I didn't play it for years, and then I had just, No Man's Sky is good and has this huge update, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I think that's a great way to do it. Even if it's not like a huge update, it's still like, oh, this thing has an update and is good. It kind of gets people talking, even if it's just someone in there's a friend I have who's just like, oh, this game I like has an update and I think you would like that. It's kind of like a small little thing, and it builds up and up and up, and it adds to the discussion about the game, and the kind of people who like it more, and then it might bring new people who see the DLC. And I think it's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and you Alice, you seem very aware of, even though, like you say, Rhell is a game primarily for you, you feel aware of the elements of your game that make it interesting, I guess, from a clipping standpoint, from a social standpoint, from, you know, when it's eventually out there on Twitch, it's like you're almost like seeding that in terms of, you know, aforementioned solving the door 50 different ways solution thing is like these are the things that people really seem to tap into, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think part of that came because I used to, not used to, I still do post about Rhell. What am I talking about? I've just given up on it. Don't post about it anymore. I think I used to post about it very early in development. So I kind of, through doing that, I mean, I made a post about it like the week I was making the game. And I think through doing that, I kind of like got the momentum of what people like about it. And I kind of learned like, okay, this gets more interaction. Like, for example, I was originally making posts about Rhell and I was doing like a grey box room where it's, you know, it's just a bunch of grey tiles because I hadn't made an environment yet. And I was just showing off mechanics. And I was like, okay, here's a thing where you can make a cube into water and you can swim in it. And I got hardly any engagement at all. And then all of a sudden I'm making an area and I do it with natural rock and I show it off and I get 10 times more engagement because it's just like, oh, people don't like really care about the mechanics of this. They care because they're viewing something that's pretty and fun and interesting to them. And I think that's like kind of, from a marketing perspective, kind of like what I focus on, where it's just like, I don't need to make a manifesto about why my game is complicated. I just need to show like a 5-second video of me having fun. And because if I'm having fun in the video, I think other people are going to see that and they're going to think that's also fun. And they're going to want to kind of do the same thing themselves. Or if not, at least share it because, you know, it's a fun video and then they can share it with other people.
Before I allow you to go back to your computers and carry on doing your day jobs, we have the customary 3 questions of doom for the Convergence podcast. First of all, horror stories. I want to know when you've had a moment in the industry where maybe you've had to talk to, you know, an investor, a studio, publisher, and you've just had to deal with, you know, the worst feedback or total cluelessness or whatever you would deem to be a horror story from your perspective.
I think for me, honestly, with Rhell, it's been kind of easy breezy because the Yogscast got into it very, very suddenly. I think my only horror story with pushing that for Rhell with publishers was at the same time. I also got feedback from another publisher, kind of like, you know, similar time frame, but I was mostly talking to the Yogscast, so I don't care too much, but, you know, still talking to them, seeing, you know, just in case the Yogscast blows up, kind of bit. And it was just kind of a weird thing where I was showing them and I had the prototype, which was the dungeon video and then a couple just areas, you know, the kind of thing you would send as a prototype. And the feedback I got back was just like, hey, could you send a bunch of puzzles for us to play and just like a bunch of areas? And it was kind of just like, I'm looking for help here with funding. I don't want to make a full game to send to you and get back to it, which was just, it just kind of struck me as a bit weird to like want additional content for it kind of thing, where it was like asking for way more for a show-off sort of thing.
Yeah, it was like, hey, can we have some of those sweet ideas, please?
Could we have a full game, please? Just real quick.
And then we'll decide whether to put any money into it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Once you've made the game, we'll pay you. But, you know.
How about you, Alistair?
I think the main horror story that I had was launch day, funnily enough, because, I have a habit, talking about like quick iteration times, particularly pre-launch, of just doing updates. You know, Isaac, who's the producer at Yogscast, excellent to work with, but he gets a little bit fed up of me going like, I've done an update with no warning, I've just put it out there. He's like, hang on, what's going on? And so I did one the night before launch, and Isaac was like, why have you done this? And then I was on the train on the way down, and so we'd had playtesters play it, it was fine, and somebody had sent a key to their friend who was a streamer so they could play it on launch, and they said the game's just crashing whenever it loads. And I was on the train down, and launch is like 2 hours away or something, and I got my laptop out and I'm on the train to Bristol, which has got a lot of tunnels, which is relevant to the story. And I'm sitting there using Parsec to connect to my PC to desperately try and work out what's going on with this person, because it might be that everyone's going to have this problem, or maybe the playtesters are fine. And every time you go through a tunnel, a Parsec drops, you're back to the start, you've got to try one. So I get to the Yogscast, to Bristol, go to the Yogscast office, and I'm like running through Bristol, and there's a river in the way, and there's a bridge, and the bridge was closed. So I had to run up to our next bridge, run down again, ride the Yogscast office, like, hello everyone, nice to meet you for the first time. Get out of the way, put my laptop down, work out what's going wrong. And it turned out that there was a bug that was only present for new characters. And so the playtesters had been playing before, and they were fine. But when you were a new character, it would just... So I just hit roll back and got rid of the changes I got from before. And I learned my lesson about doing updates the day before launch. And thankfully, it all went off, broadly without a hitch. But it was, for that bit, that was a little bit tense. That was... I do kind of wonder what it would have been like, because people say how important that first initial burst of steam is. And that's where you get the most visibility. And if that had been the game just crashes, there's going to be negative reviews immediately and straight out the gate. And it could have been a completely different experience. So thank you to whoever sent that key. I can't remember who it was, I'm afraid, but whoever sent that key to their friend, and whoever streamer didn't just go, oh, never mind, close the game, but said, hey, can you fix this for me? That's the top-notch feedback that really makes a difference.
You painted a very cinematic picture then. I sort of had this vision of you running through the streets of Bristol, Tom Cruise
It
style.
sounds like a roguelike in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Of just like you recessing every time your Wi-Fi goes off.
Yeah.
The second is the thrill of the new, which is really applicable with something like Rhell, for example. But what does it take for a new game to excite you? And is there anything that you've seen on the horizon that's really prompted that feeling?
I think for me, just anything silly. I'm such a child where it's like, I don't care about like a new mechanic or something interesting. It's just like I see a game and it's like, oh, it looks silly, I'll play that. Like that is just to me what I love the most about new games, where it's just like I will see something, it looks wacky, and then I'll want to play it.
Have you seen anything silly recently that you...
Okay, I don't use social media. I don't see anything. It's like the first game I've seen in so long was the new Donkey Kong Country. I somehow don't exist. I don't look at Twitter. I don't look at Blue Sky. It's very bizarre. Sometimes I'll just stumble upon stuff, and that's kind of like my bit. I learned about Blueprints like a couple days ago, and that's like my first thing that I've just stumbled into.
How about you, Alistair?
I think it's really interesting. I've kind of the same perspective. I don't really look at games that are coming out. I think, like, why do I want to know about that? I can't play it. What's the point? So, but I think it's really interesting also when you're marketing your own game and trying to get people interested in the game that they're not going to be able to play for ages, which is really interesting. I think in terms of games that are upcoming, obviously I have to say Rhell, because that's coming out. I like the idea of these games that are very like sandboxy and this idea of like I really like games where it feels like you're able to solve something in your own way. I think games that have become very like linear and very like, here's just, what's the right answer is whatever the developer thought of, you have to solve. Whereas as we've heard, clearly that's the opposite, is the developer hasn't thought of a solution at all. It's a whole new thing that you're going to discover while making the trailer.
The developers put a door here, not thought about it too hard.
Yeah, that really gives the player the agency, which I think is really important. So I think, that kind of game that I really enjoy is one where you feel like as a player, you're kind of getting ownership of the results of the game. You feel like you're the one who solved the problem rather than working out what the developer happened to think about when they were making it.
Wonderful. And then finally, the Indie Hall of Game. If you could induct one game, one indie into our Hall of Game, what would you choose?
I think I'd go with Void Strangers. It's a weird block pushing game. I just love it. It's so weird. I don't know what's going on in the plot. It's bizarre, but it has like 1,000 levels, and I love it. It is. I was just obsessed with it last year. It's like a 1-bit or like a 2-bit sort of, puzzle game where you can move one block per puzzle to a different space, and that's it. But I think it manages to get like such a high level of complexity as you keep going, and there's just like so much stuff it presents you with, where like I was playing it and I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could do that. It's fascinating. I think games like that inspire me so much, where it's just, I'm playing it and every 5 seconds I'm discovering some like new weird thing, and it's just amazing. That would be my recommendation.
I think I've already mentioned the one, but Unrailed I think is a really great example of a game that is, it's great gameplay and it's a really fun game. But I think the value that it gives, and also what was a huge inspiration for PlateUp, is actually kind of the way that it handles co-op and the way it treats the players in a co-op situation. The kind of maybe the clearest example of this is that when you boot up into Unrailed, there isn't really like a menu with a mouse you have to click on. It's the characters running around, and so to start the game, similar to how it's in PlateUp, because that's what it's inspired by. You go and stand on the start game button together, and I think that just in itself, it means that from the moment the game kind of starts, players are playing the game together. They're actually, it's a co-op experience through and through, rather than a lot of other games where there's broadly one player with a mouse and keyboard who's driving the experience, say, or one person choosing the menu, or one person picking the level. But that way that it treats you as a group who are playing the game as a group, rather than as, maybe other people who've joined in someone's session or something. And I think that's yeah, that was a huge influence over PlateUp's lobby, for instance. So,
Alistair, thank you very, very much for your time. Huge thanks to Alice and Alastair for taking time to talk with me and each other. As someone who's always got a couple of game ideas bubbling away but fears they lack both the talent and the patience, I always find it really useful to meet genuinely talented people who confirm those fears. I think I'm joking. Anyway, PlateUp is available on every major platform and is every bit the co-op gem that 2+ million other gamers have already found it to be. Apart from the ones claiming refunds, obviously. And you can play a demo of Rhell right now on Steam and find more solutions to puzzles that Alice has yet to dream up. If you want to join their communities or follow them on socials, check the details in the episode description. You'll also find links to details about the next Convergence Showcase, currently scheduled for the 18th of September, as well as our social channels where our lovely team continues to curate and share indies that deserve your attention. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next time with another pair of indie darlings. See ya. Can we do one more run on that? Because I realised that basically it was really far down the page and I wasn't scrolling up, so I was just like looking further and further down for the copy. All right. Happy? All right. Cool. Massive thanks to Alice and Alastair for taking time to talk with me and each other. As someone who's always got a couple of game ideas bubbling away but fears they lack both the talent and the patience, I always find it really useful to meet genuinely talented people who confirm those fears. I mean, I think I'm joking anyway. Anyway, PlateUp is available on every major platform and is every bit the co-op gem that 2+ million other gamers have already found it to be. Apart from the ones claiming refunds, obviously. And you can play a demo of Rhell right now on Steam and find more solutions to puzzles that Alice has yet to dream up. If you want to join their communities or follow them on socials, check the details in the episode description. You'll also find links to details about the next Convergence Showcase, currently scheduled for the 18th of September, as well as our social channels where our lovely team continues to curate and share indies that deserve your attention. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back next time with another pair of indie darlings. Bye.